It's got a roof. It's also got concrete base. So the standards that we're meeting are so much higher than any other existing sewage treatment standard. I mean, septic tanks discharge incredible amounts of nutrients into the soil, which become pollutants. For example, the Willamette Valley it's a big agricultural area, heavy use of chemical fertilizers. The aquifers throughout the Willamette Valley are polluted with nitrate. So if you have a well in the Willamette Valley, you've got to treat your water for nitrates because it's poisonous. But it's a nutrient for plants. Nitrate, ammonium nitrate, that's a great chemical fertilizer. So the traditional septic tanks and drain fields discharge all the nutrients into the groundwater. This totally does not do anything. There is nothing that leaves and goes into the ground. Okay, so that's the advantage of this. I mean, it's a super high standard. Nobody has ever achieved this standard of pollution control that I'm aware of anywhere in the world. These will be proposed standards coming out next year for composting toilets for the International Building Code. So we're working with people who are writing the code, and these are the standards that they wish. So in a nutshell, sequester your compost from any vermin, flies, rats, etc. So we have the roof, we have the concrete base. Do not discharge any effluent into the ground, so no compost or fluid from the composting process goes into the ground. It's gated so that casual people can't come in, like kids can't come in. From the outside, it just looks like a barrier. You have to know, I mean, if your kids are really young, they'd have to know to open the door, but the latch is actually inside. And then all ventilation openings are screened to prevent insects from getting into like flies, house flies. So it's a very, very high standard that we're meeting. This is actually going to be the next generation of building standard for composting toilets, owner-built composting toilets. So, I mean, it's really quite amazing. It's really quite a revolution in the process. Nobody's ever done this before. We're hoping to actually get a permit for this next year once the new code comes out.
Nice.
Okay, so this would be the first time anywhere on the planet anybody's gotten a permit. I mean, it's really quite something for this high degree of safety, and it's almost like overdone. I would call it overdone. I mean, like you can see our compost there, the composting process that we use there. We don't have a concrete seal on the bottom, and there's a little bit of composting effluent that goes into the ground, but it's really pretty minimal. Compare that with a septic tank and drain field where you mix a tiny quantity of potentially infectious material, fecal matter, with a huge amount of water, and then you discharge it into the ground. I mean, it's insane, but that is the accepted standard for sewage treatment in rural areas in this country, and basically around the world. If you have a flush toilet that uses water, I mean, what do you do with that? There's such huge quantities of it, you just have to discharge it into the ground. Typically it ends up in the aquifer or it goes directly into surface water like streams. So, I mean, it's a terrible thing. It's the worst thing that you could possibly do. It's insane to mix our potentially infectious waste with huge amounts of water and then discharge it into the environment. What kind of insanity is that? But that's what the standard has been. So, I mean, it's really...
Wouldn't this help in a place like California where they're having like an extreme drought?
Well, yes, because in that case, you don't need all this huge quantities of water to mix with your sewage, with your fecal matter and pee. So, you know, on the other hand, you can say, yeah, it's really not that relevant because residential use of water is dwarfed by agricultural use. So, I mean, 2/3, 3/4 of the water used in California goes to farms. And the big wastage of water there is the animal agriculture. So dairies, they're raising alfalfa. I mean, alfalfa is an incredibly water-intensive crop. That's why it takes so much water to create animal products. I mean, each gallon of milk probably requires 500 or 1,000 gallons of water to create that. That's where the water, that's the source of the water problem in California, is animal agriculture. If you're putting it directly on plants, that really it is not that much. I mean, it still probably dwarfs residential use, but it's the farming use that really uses so much water. So for today, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12 buckets, 5 gallons. Most of this is just Humanure, urine, but we put our own household compost in it, so you can see our compost here. And then I just grabbed that was on the ground. This is like a car hood. Open the hood and you can see the compost too. Anyway, we checked the temperature, so amazingly, these block composting bins, they have several advantages. One, they're vermin proof. Two, they don't rot. As you remember, we used to have the pallet bins here, and they had gaps between each of the boards. Rats could easily just go right in and burrow right into the compost pile. So we have totally eliminated that, particularly since we're screening any openings and then the roof comes down. So we have absolutely no rat problem here anymore. But the other thing with the blocks is they have this air gap in the center, which air is a good insulator. So it really insulates this. And what's amazing is this, the compost here was put in probably 2 months ago, and it's still 130 degrees in the center of the pile. Now if I check on the outside, it's going to be less. It drops down maybe 100 degrees on the outside. But, so we depend on thermophilic composting to kill any pathogens. So as you know, compost heats up when it decomposes and creates heat, and that heat cooks the compost and sterilizes it. There's certain bacteria that can survive that high heat, but they're not pathogenic bacteria. They don't cause any disease. So our compost is thoroughly cooked and sterilized. What I'm going to do is put in what did I say, 10 buckets? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 buckets that we have today into this bin here, and then we'll cover it with wood chips and put the thermometer back. But before we do that, I want to take the effluent. So if you notice, it's kind of hard to see here, but each of these bins slopes down to the center. It's kind of like a shower. And they have a drain at the bottom of each one. Yeah, you can see. So any fluid that comes from the composting process goes into a drain and then ends up in this sump right here. So we have a sump right here, and then there's a 5-gallon bucket that I'll show you in a moment. It's not full. So in the composting process that we do with our kitchen compost, this fluid just flows into the ground. It's small quantities, and it's not particularly of concern. But for the system here, we actually capture any of that and then pour it back on top of the piles. Okay, so the piles, since they produce so much heat, the water evaporates from them. You can see when I opened this up, this was all wet right here because of the condensation, and the water vapor leaves the pile. So I'm going to dump this in first. You can see it's about a half a bucket. And I'll put this back in to catch any more. And then I'm going to go ahead and empty everything in here. So first of all, I'm going to take this. This is soybean plants we grew edamame with this. And they were pulled and just laid on the ground and dried out. So I'm going to just break these up into pieces. And now, dump all the compost in. So I'll rinse these out and then pour the effluent, or pour the rinsing back into the pile. Before I do anything more, I'm going to take off the lids. We have about a dozen people using our system now. Circle so I can rinse them easily. And there's no reason why you can't put in kitchen compost in this also. We put our own stuff. This is about 1 week's worth of collection from our farm. It's really wet. We have a total now of 9 bins. The kitchen composting already has 11. grab the fork and spread it out. And then I'm going to bring the hose in. So let's move that over. So I'm going to pull the hose right. We're just wrapping up construction on the second. Stack up the buckets like that. Rinse them. So all the drainage is captured. So all the rinsing is occasionally get the brush. I'm a stickler for cleanliness and neatness. You might call me a neat freak. And you just repeat this process 2 or 3 times, and then buckets are rinsed. So 12 buckets and less than 1 full bucket of rinse aid. So we have 1/12 of the material. With the typical flush toilet, it's 1 part excrement and 50 parts water. So we're 1/12. You can see the amount of water we use is virtually compared with the typical process. So this rinse goes into the pile. And then this one gets rinsed. Is done, and the last thing to do is rinse the floor that we use to spread. So that's done, and now cover is the last step of the process. So this is just wood chips here. Put in 4 or 5. And just like with the kitchen compost, this creates a nice sanitary cover that seals in the odors. you can take a look inside now and see what it looks like. It just looks like a bin full of wood chips. So that's 140 right in the center. Remember, this was at least 2 months ago that we finished this pile. We've never achieved these sustained temperatures before with the pallet type of composting. So using the blocks not only helps keep the rats out and vermin out, but it prevents cooling down of the pile too quickly. And then finally we'll put that in. Now if you come back in probably 3 days, this will be 165 degrees. It's amazing how hot the temperature gets. To put that in perspective, hot tub is 105 degrees, and pasteurization temperature is 159. So our pile is hotter than pasteurization temperature. Pasteurization requires just 1 minute to kill any human pathogens. So
at what temperature?
159 is pasteurization temperature.
Yeah.
And we achieve, if you come back in 3 days, this will be 165.
Wow.
165 degrees. So we achieve really high temperatures here. The blocks tend to insulate it and keep the pile warm. And then it sterilizes the pile. It basically cooks the pile. So it's, quite an amazing process. And then the final compost process, we're going to be testing for pathogens like E. coli. We haven't done that yet, but that's part of this whole new approach is to demonstrate with scientific testing how safe and hygienic this process is. And it's quite obvious that we get a lot of compost from it. So the compost is great for building soil. What we're trying to do, and I'm not sure if you're interested in this, we could go ahead and spread some urine. The urine issue is fresh urine is sterile, odorless, and can easily, and is water salt. The nutrients are already dissolved in water, so you can put it on your plants, and it's like a jolt of nutrients that they get. Kind of actually quite similar to the non-organic chemical fertilizers that are created with petrochemicals. So you get this jolt. It's kind of like cocaine or sugar. It's this concentrated nutrient that you pour on. Does not build soil the way compost does. So compost gives actually creates new structure to the soil, which is very, very beneficial, humus. Urine doesn't do that. Urine just provides the nutrients. So you pour the nutrients on. The plants take them up quickly, and in as quick as 1 week, you can see weak yellow, kind of spindly plants turn a deep green, really get tremendously thick and strong and have vigorous growth. So it's a jolt of nutrients. So we try and encourage people to save peas separately because it's such a valuable resource to put on, because it doesn't have any pathogens. You don't have to worry about that, about composting it or heating it up or sterilizing it in any fashion. You can just go ahead and put it directly on the plants. We dilute typically 1 to 4. Are you interested in showing that? I'm going to do that next.
Yeah,
actually.
I'd like,
Right.
Sure.
So this is done, and if you look in here, there's a little bit of drip coming from the water that we just poured in. That's the sump. And then that will be recycled back into the piles just as we did at the beginning of the process. So I'm going to close this process. Close the lids now. We'll move on. So it's really an amazing process. Okay, let's move on. So this morning's harvest is 10 half-gallon jugs of pee. So half-gallon bottle, and this is a 2.5-gallon watering can. So what I'm going to do is pour it into here. So this is pure pee, sterile and essentially odorless. I like to rinse each bottle 4 times. This one, I haven't rinsed it 4 times. Blast of nutrients.